Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Resource Gatherer. I'm one of your hosts, Justin, and this is with me, my co-host, Cody. Today, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, but before that, we wanted to address a key issue that we noticed that we've had. As you might have guessed, we've taken a pretty ecstatic break over the past month and a half.
A couple extra weeks.
Yeah, a little bit longer than we anticipated, and we ended up cutting it off a little bit shorter than we wanted. The reason for that is life happens, and one of the things that happened, Cody actually got a new job, and I also needed a mental break because it was the holiday season, and it's kind of rough around that time of year.
Yeah.
So with that out of the way, we wanted to say thank you for listening and thank you for coming back to listen to us. I know it's hard to be able to have a weekly podcast fall off, but I assure you we're going to continue to make content this year. 2024 is the year that Resource Gatherer hopefully fills up your cup of tea with all the knowledge and expertise that we bring, which is very little because we're clearly just two random guys on the internet.
Yeah.
On that note, let's go ahead and get into this week's episode of The Resource Gatherer. So, for this week, Cody, I think it's only right that we start the year off by talking about 2023's Game of the Year, one of my favorite games, and now that you finally have played it...
Yeah, I finally broke down.
Baldur's Gate. So this is a topic I've been wanting to talk about on the podcast for months now. I actually was one of the people who got the pre-release. I was so head over heels over this game from the very beginning that I was obsessed, and then finally being able to have the opportunity to talk about it with all my friends who finally broke down and bought the game was super exciting. So Cody, talk about your experience. What was your ideology of like the game itself now that you've played a little bit of it?
Well, I mean, like it's very in depth. It's very smooth for your transactions. Like I'm going to perform my main action, I'm going to perform my bonus action, I have my movement speed and my opportunities of attack. Like, it's very intuitive. And then there's also, like, what really grips me is the plot twist.
Okay.
Like the hag.
Yeah, yes.
Like, so not to go into any spoilers if you haven't, played it, and you somehow haven't played it.
Yeah.
I
think at this point, given its vast popularity, I don't think that we have to worry too much about spoilers because the game's been released for several months now.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that maybe we don't give away every detail about Act 1 through 3, but
like, you think you're doing the right thing and then it turns around, it's like, oh, well, I shouldn't have done that. It was a nice plot twist and things like that, like making your decisions one way or the other, because it also gives you those permanent consequences, and that's what I really enjoy of if you decide to make a poor decision or you make a decision that you thought was right and it ends up being like, oh yeah, by the way, like, even though your whole party agreed with you, you guys all made the wrong decision because you were all thinking the same way.
Yeah, so one of the crucial elements that I think kind of matters here is, Cody, what did you actually end up playing as far as, like, class-wise?
I played as a paladin.
See, so in what regard were you talking about that it was sort of crucial that sort of broke? Was it your oath?
Yeah. My oath got broken. I lost my eye. Like my dude has been through the thick of it to say the least,
Absolutely, yeah. So given that you played a paladin, obviously I think that was probably one of the best choices to play through, in my opinion, as far as like gameplay wise. Mm-hmm. I think paladin really works well, especially with the other characters' backgrounds, because you kind of have a lot of the other roles fixed. I think there's very few roles that sort of make like a good team. Mm-hmm. And you need that charisma caster in order to like sort of round out the group, depending on who you choose.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can always like have one of the characters as a cleric was a Shadowheart. She's a cleric, so you can have that. But I really enjoy playing as a paladin in D&D in general. So naturally, that's like my go-to selection. Like, if I'm playing with a random group of people, and I'll always choose a paladin just because I enjoy that style of play. I cast whack.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I actually, so I had two different, I've had several playthroughs at this point. I think I've had two very, very different playthroughs. So my first playthrough, I played a bard. And my bard playthrough, I think I kind of cheated the game a little bit. I didn't really like take a lot of time like trying to get through every aspect of the game. I was just trying to progress as quickly as possible through the main storyline. And to do that, I rolled really high in charisma rolls and went into areas that were like, are you sure you want to go in here? You're too low of a level to get to the next area. And I did that all the way into Act 3. And by the time I got to Act 3, I was so low in level that I basically died every time I tried to go up against anyone. So my second playthrough, I decided not to make that same mistake, and I decided to go with something that's really near and dear to my heart. I like playing wizards, and specifically I wanted to play a necromancer. I think that, like, in D&D, I think one of the coolest things about D&D is that you have the option to be able to play all these different classes and races and etc. But the thing that I think that D&D doesn't do well is necromancy.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I don't feel they do well with that is because necromancy, like, when you read about it, lore and stuff like that, like, there is, like, a wide range of, like, what it can do. So for, like, the D&D world, because we already have an extensive list of rules and, like, possibilities, so it definitely leaves that more up to, like, DM discretion. But also, it's just, I mean, necromancy itself, like, it's always viewed as a negative thing. So if you're going to go to, like, any city or anything like that and, oh, there's a necromancer, you're going to be chased out of town with pitchforks and knives. Like,
absolutely. But on the same token, I actually like that element because as you progress through the playthrough, you're allowed to have a little bit of feeding into your internal darkness by feeding into the abilities of your actual tentacles.
Yeah.
And so by having access to that additional magic and, like, sort of feeling into your dark urges, as one of the playthroughs you can have does, it allows you to try to take a different take on what you would normally play in D&D. What was really cool, though, and I think this is the main reason why in 5e exclusively, or specifically, they have issues, is necromancers have access to a plethora of monsters. And the reason why they don't want your players to play a necromancer the way that you would ideally wish to play them has a lot to do with the fact that when you have so many monsters that you have to keep track of, it slows down the mechanics for combat, as well as it puts a lot of the CR ratings that generally have higher ratings because of the fact that you're, like, accounting for so many bodies. It doesn't take those extra bodies that you're able to bring into combat into effect.
Yeah.
So while, like, maybe a druid has access to, like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 extra bodies, and some of them are, like, you know, big hitters, like you can get dinosaurs, etc., etc. Necromancers, when you really get into, like, high level necromancy, the best way to play it is to play whites. So you have access to these higher intellect beings, and each of the whites has access to 12 individual zombies that they can control.
Yes.
So in D&D, you only have access to 3 of them. But imagine if, like, you get to play, like, 12 whites who then have 12 zombies.
There's 144 people you have, like,
at your disposal that you can then use. But I think that, like, there's certain storylines where that would just be great, because I think one of the problems I have with, like, D&D and, like, the newer formats is it doesn't really feel like it has that level of, like, Lord of the Rings style large scale combat. Like, imagine a Battle of Helm's Deep, but just you and your party taking on an army or horde of, like, orcs or goblins or etc.
Like, the only way you could really, like, incorporate that would be, like, our custom house rules of, like, the roll-off system.
Yeah.
You know, like...
but then again, but also, like, I just imagine, like, the scaling of that. So, like, for example, one of the really cool elements that I've added into the show for the Dice Age is that's what the whole concept is they're actually going to be going into siege combat. So they're scaling up for this war against this penguin legion. And the penguins, while they are very squishy, very easy to kill, there are so many of them.
Oh, yeah.
But they're also smart. They have access to technology. Like in previous episodes, they had access to, like, trebuchets and, like, other
siege weapons.
Other siege weapons that, I mean, may or may not have had monsters in them. But regardless, I had blocks of ice that had water elementals in them.
Nice.
That I chucked at the party.
That's clever.
Yeah. So, and then obviously, like, they have other stories that sort of do other things. But I do think that, like, element-wise, I think one of the coolest aspects about this game is that it really did give you that itch that you're trying to scratch if you're not able to play, as is the case for me a lot of times, as a player for D&D.
Yeah.
And enjoy just being a part of the story.
Yeah, because I play a lot with one of my friends that lives, you know, like a full state over. He's like 4 hours away. But, like, Friday nights we played Baldur's Gate together, and it's like, cool. This is like being in a D&D campaign without actually like have to leave my house.
Yeah.
You still have your interaction. You still have like your things, like he's trying to romance Karlak right now.
Hey, listen, I understand the Dami Mommy of Avernus. If we ever, for those at home, one of the things that we talked about doing previously on the show is we were going to do Kingdoms. The reason we are not going to be releasing Kingdoms content has nothing to do with the fact that we can't. It's just that it takes so much extra time, and on a weekly basis because of the content that's required for like work, life, and everything else. It just becomes so much of a hassle to be able to build those things out. When if somebody has to drop out last minute because if life gets in the way, then you have to I have to build a deck for them. Then I have to set up the shots. It takes up an entire weekend, but. Had we released one of the episodes that I was going to be playing is we did actually a Baldur's Gate theme, and I did have a Karlak Dami Mommy of Avernus t-shirt that I should have worn in this episode. Man, we should go back and we should make that happen. 1 second.
And boom, just like that.
Poof, just like magic. It seems that my Dami Mommy of Avernus t-shirt has suddenly appeared on my chest. Who would have guessed it? Movie magic, wild and crazy. For those of you who can only hear my voice, yes, there is a Dami Mommy of Avernus t-shirt on my body now. It has miraculously appeared as if it was a part of the Baldur's Gate. Anyways, but regardless, we played the episode with that intent of like trying to, because I was really, so I built a couple of different decks that people could also play. So I built a Shadow Sims deck, so it's the Shadow Heart deck, and then that was tokens, and then my Dami Mommy of Avernus deck was, as you would expect it to be, a combat-focused extra combats deck.
Yeah. No, that was a good one. And the game was fun. It was great times and stuff like that, but it was just trying so much to get, there's just so many moving parts, especially with that extra person.
Yeah.
It makes it much more difficult, but it was fun. If you get a chance, play Kingdoms with your friends, because playing a 5-player Kingdoms game is way better than 2 pods of 3.
I agree. I think that personally, I enjoy Kingdoms more, especially because I think the rule system that we created for that, and again, we've talked about it before, having access to those additional rules where it kind of balanced out the system a little bit. Just changing out the extra rules, especially for the assassin role. The assassin role, I think, was probably
the worst.
And changing it to a Joker role where when you hit someone, you take their roll card. Gave them an advantage where they're like, hey, I don't really have a good out here, but I could kill the king, become the king, and now I have that out.
Exactly.
And then just also having other players be able to kill other people and then have them join their side. So the bandit and the usurper had those options as well. And then when the knight killed somebody, they just literally are like, hey, I am your knight. There is no questioning here. So
the reveal, which is clutch sometimes because, playing games, I have been the king, and I've had it down to where my knight and somebody else was still around, and I made the wrong decision, and I lost because of it. So.
And sometimes that's nice to have into the playing, but I do think that if you have the ability to show the advantage, it's always great to have. Because again, that was what I enjoyed about it, and we're still going to be playing Kingdoms off camera. It's just I think having a 5th person in a turn cycle adds so much extra time to a show. I understand why the professionals stick with 4 people games, because when your hour game turns into a 2 or 3 hour game, as was our case.
Ours was a 3.5 hour game.
For the first episode, and then the second episode ended up being 2.5 hours. It's a lot of content that I would then have to edit and then produce to be able to push out each month. So instead of doing that, we might do magic content at some point. Maybe we'll go back to casual play. But I also need an assistant to do that because right now it's just your boy.
Yeah, and I'm not that skilled with that one. I turn wrenches, man.
Listen, I can do it. I have a full-time job on top of it. So I wanted to apologize to anyone on that end. But getting back into Baldur's Gate. So Baldur's Gate, one of the elements that I really think was interesting was that's kind of different than normal Dungeons and Dragons. That a lot of people who now have played Baldur's Gate are expecting when they play D&D is how they interact with items and spells during that don't take a full action.
Correct.
So I don't know if you noticed that, I've always kind of played it that way where you always have free item interaction, But like in the game for Baldur's Gate, they didn't really make that a thing where you were like, okay, I have my attack, or I have my action, I have my reaction, I have my your bonus action, and then you have your item interaction that allowed you to like take a healing potion, also do an attack in order to ensure that you were always good or be able to help your party members.
Yeah, because like in the aspect of having that free item interaction, that allows you as a DM to give more challenging scenarios out without making it like overly ridiculous. Like it makes the players think, like I can use my free item interaction to, drop my sword to pick up, something from, draw my sword, or drop my hammer to draw my sword or something like that, or get a potion out or do different things like that. Like, use a healing potion just to top myself off. But just having that, minuscule extra step that you're able to do something, now your CR ratings and stuff like that can change and different things like that. And it makes it a lot more, I don't know, I would say fun, but it's also more just feasible.
Yeah, one of the main things that I think that was kind of interesting. So in Baldur's Gate, and I played it a lot of that into a lot of the ways that I do storytelling too. There's never one definitive way to defeat something, right? So, for example, you don't have to just like try to kill the big boss by yourself with your group or party. Mm-hmm. There's always like someone who can ally and help you had you done things slightly different. So if you're going up against like in Act 1, for example, because I don't want to give a lot of spoilers for the later acts, you have access to certain characters who... Bagheera. In Act 1, for example, you have access to certain characters who can help you. For example, there is an angel that's locked in some chains. If you use your first action to use the Quicken spell, or you take the Quicken potion, you're able to get to her quickly and then release her from her bond so she can add to your playthrough of the actual final combat that occurs in Act 1. So it kind of gives you access to like, hey, here's all the help. Or like, for example, if you're doing like going into the dungeon raid during the first one, had you like interacted with, say, like there was a bunch of like these monsters that were inside of the like kitchen, if you had interacted with them and helped them in any way, they end up actually joining your team to actually help you in this battle. Or if you went and worked alongside like the people who were at just general like processing for like how you interact with people, like the more people you worked with, the more access you got to help. I was mixing a little bit of the second and the first act. I was gonna say I'm a little lost here. Still in the first.
Sorry.
Act. So for example, in the first act, had you helped Hausen get out of his cage?
Yes.
Then Hausen could then join your team in order to take out the other bosses.
Yes, we did that one.
Yes, and then in the second act, there's more stuff. Anyways,
gotcha.
So
well, and that's like you're talking about like your interactions and stuff like that. One of the things, like my buddy that I play with, he's never really played like hardcore in D&D. Like he's understood it, and he's played a lot of Baldur's Gate, and like we were one of the combat areas, and I was showing him just like how like powerful your bonus actions are. Sometimes he's like, dude, these bonus actions are terrible. Like I don't really have anything real. Like like Gale has terrible bonus actions at low level.
Yeah, but most classes don't have bonus actions, or like usually use them in traditional Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. But like for me with my paladin, when you're like in the cave fighting a bunch of spiders.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I kept doing was, I would, attack one, kill it, because like the little ones easy to kill, but I only had one attack because I wasn't level 5 yet. Well, then I would move over to the other one that's by a ledge, and I would use my push action and just push it off the edge, and it'd fall to its, eternal doom. My buddy's sitting there. He was like, "This is busted." He was like, "You were literally getting like 2 attacks, even though you're not really doing 2 attacks."
And so, yes. So I actually I had a similar moment in my first playthrough where I was going up against a person in Act 2, and during the fight, they were really close to the edge, and they were like kind of like a bigger boss. And I was getting absolutely demolished by like their dudes. I had to like, so cool thing about D&D, or about Baldur's Gate is, yes, you have to live by the consequences of your actions, but you can also save scum. as I recommend. So right before you get into any important battle, any port moment, you hit save.
Yeah, a quick save wheel is clutch.
Yeah. So
I've learned that.
Is that way whenever you inevitably die, fail, or whatever, you can go back to your last save point. Plus, whenever I'm playing video games, I'm not looking to have a challenge. I'm sorry for anyone who does your Dark Soul like diehards. That is not me. I am what you would call a casual gamer. Okay, I look at video games as an escape, and I want to enjoy them on easy mode as much as possible. So any game I played is at the easiest setting. I am like rocking like child settings. But regardless,
I'm a platinum chaser.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to get every challenge trophy possible every time.
Not me. I am the opposite because like I think that the reason why I enjoy playing video games for me is like something that I do by myself or like with close friends, but I'm not usually looking to like do a bunch of like high level stuff just because that I don't know. There's so many other games that we play like board games or like card games or anything else where I always have to think about like optimizing potentially that I don't always want to feel that way. I want to just be able to turn my brain off and go, ooh, look, Karlach looks pretty in that costume. Heck yeah. And then that's like my whole yes, Karlach. But
Simping
anyway,
over here.
Listen, yes, I did romance Karlach. Yes, it did make sense. But regardless, I think one of the things that like I found was that like, yeah, having the ability to just kick someone out of combat or potentially like into a pit, for example, and just defeating the big boss without ever having to actually fight them again. It's just different ways to play that if you roll high enough on the athletics roll or whatever you needed in order to like defeat that person, you could still do it without having the consequences of the longevity of a combat.
Yeah, or like the spiderweb bridges, I would use Gale's firebolt to make the people fall off of it.
Yeah.
Because firebolt at level 3 is doing at most like 6 to 8 points of damage, or they can take 12 points of fall damage like per 6 feet.
Yeah, it's it's 1d6 generally in D&D. It's 1d6 per 10 feet.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they scaled it in Baldur's Gate.
But I mean, it's way more significant than a firebolt, and you could hit multiple people if they're on the bridge, or utilizing your areas, like when you're in caves and stuff like that, and they have, or not caves, but like dark rooms that have like the torches above it. You can shoot those, the firebolt always hits. It has a 100% chance of hitting on it. Which I did enjoy that aspect. They gave you your percentages of how likely you were to hit something.
So one of the things I really enjoyed about it, and I think this is probably like a lot of people who are newer to D&D who probably wouldn't think about, is it gave you access to the ability to think about problems like utilizing your environment more. Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of people in Dungeons and Dragons don't do. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, like what I like to do in D&D. I like to give people an out whenever you're playing a combat, right? So if you're playing, and I learned this trick actually from watching Dimension 20 from Brendan Lee Mulligan.
Yeah.
When you're fighting a big combat, rather than just being like, hey, you have to fight this guy, make it to where if they do meet certain requirements, for example, they had like the corn boss in like Dimension 20's like first episode of what is it? Something high school high. It was
video game high school.
No, Fantasy High. It's like their D&D content.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So from that first episode, they fought like a corn boss, and like had they done certain steps, they could have made that boss easier to fight in order to overbeat them. So it's like, hey, this is a really, really strong fight, or it can be easier by having allies, and that kind of relates back to what we were saying before. And that's kind of how I approach Dungeons and Dragons. When it comes to environment, though, I think for a lot of new players, it gave you the understanding of like, if I go into Dungeons and Dragons, I don't always have to go, hey, there's a boss, I have a sword, let me stab him. It's asking your DM, what in the environment can I use to my advantage? How do I get more creative with how I approach combat? For example, if I have a reach weapon, like say a whip, can I use the whip to then, because it only does 1d4 damage, maybe I can use the whip to then wrap it around their legs to then try to trip them before I make my secondary attack. Or maybe I can like grab the the torch that's hanging above me, and then like drop that down on them to distract them in order for one of my allies to get advantage. Like utilizing that creativity in your combat was really, really nice.
Because you're not always the hero.
Exactly.
You're going to be in situations where you are not useless because you're always useful, but you are not going to be the star of the chapter. Like there are times like when I'm playing with my buddy, yes, I may hit harder than him, but he has better perception, better charisma or something like that. And it's like, cool, I'm not going to do this. You're going to do this, or I'm going to position myself here so you can get the advantage, or like narrow hallways and stuff like that. Clouded daggers, OP.
Yeah.
If you make it so they have to go through that area,
yeah.
times.
I mean, and you've played enough D&D with me. That was one of the things that I've always sort of incorporated is using your environment to your advantage. And then also you have to rely on other people, which is why whenever you're creating a balanced party in normal Dungeons and Dragons, one of the key elements is ensuring that you have people who have a variety of skills and attributes in order to ensure that everyone can have fun, everyone can shine, and everyone can ultimately enjoy the story and create something together that you couldn't create on your own.
Yeah. No, 100%.
I think one of the elements that, still being in like the early stages of the game that you don't know yet or may not know is that the hardest part, I think, for the game developers to achieve with Baldur's Gate was they realized that after a certain leveling point, the game became difficult in order to play through. So they only were able to reach up to 12th level as a way to be able to like create characters, because after you got to 12th level, the game got really, really hard and complicated for you to be able to keep up with the NPCs that they had previously established in the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like read the monster manual or the DM's guide and stuff like that. If you want to go into more in depth of like how these games are created and stuff like that. Like you look at CR rating and stuff like that. Just because it says CR 12. Well, that doesn't mean if you're level 12, you should be able to beat it.
Yeah.
Like that's CR 12 is a pretty tough, boss and stuff like that. Because what's a Tarrasque is a CR of 24 and your max level is 20.
See,
like
I think
the scale makes sense, but it doesn't make sense at the same time.
I would love it to happen, and I know it probably won't. But if we could get a DLC, and even if it was a one-time fee like they've done, because they haven't charged us for any of the additional content, they've been fixing all the bugs and just ensuring that this game has been pristine, game of the year, 100% deserved it, because they just listened to feedback and they took everything in and they were able to fix stuff. I think everyone in the community, if they were like, hey, we're going to put out a DLC to give you a fourth act, I think everyone would pay for it.
Yeah.
Or when they eventually create Baldur's Gate 4, I think that this game is going to create the standard for what I think other role-playing games are going to look at as to how a game should be created and how they should interact with their community. Because that was really, I think, the key aspect that made this game so great, besides the fact that everyone thought it was going to flop.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why I didn't get into it, beforehand. Like, I literally waited till I heard, 15 different people that like I either hang out with or different things, and they're all like, dude, it's awesome, dude. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll, because I know me, and of course, I was right. They ended up being right, and then I ended up diving super deep down the rabbit hole, and it's like, oh, cool, I'm going to bed at 3 a.m. I got to be to work by 7. This is great.
That's me.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing about passion projects, right? Like, what I would love to see, and maybe this is really what the gaming community needed to see, was like, one, take away microtransactions.
Yes.
The main reason why I stopped playing a lot of video games is because I got tired of every time I got to a point where I really wanted something cool, I had to pay for it.
Yep.
The second thing, create characters and stories that people love and can enjoy for more than just a single playthrough or single play style. Like, I think Elder Scrolls is one of those games that like everyone's always enjoyed and loved, and this is comparable to Elder Scrolls in the fact that they're both relatively open world, but imagine if Elder Scrolls, rather than giving you all of the options and creativity that you have, but giving you all of the bugs that Elder Scrolls games give you.
Yeah.
And imagine if they took the time to develop their next game and they're like, hey, You're not going to have the level of freedom that you've had in our previous games, but you're going to get a story arc that is comparable to Baldur's Gate. And I think that would be the game that would change Elder Scrolls' dynamics of how they play.
Oh, the biggest thing with it too is like it gives it replayability.
Exactly.
You know, like you don't have to play as, you know, Joe Schmo. He's the hero. Okay, like these are your set abilities you will learn. These are your set milestones on everything. No, you get to play this game as a sorcerer, as a paladin, as a bard, you know, and then you also get to make your own interactions and choices throughout, which is what makes Baldur's Gate and even like, you know, Elder Scrolls games, like replayability. It's like, cool, that was fun playing as a knight. Now I want to play as, you know, a spellcaster. I want to play as a hybrid between the both. So
you don't want to play just a Night Stalker Archer for like every playthrough?
I mean, I do have my games I've repeatedly played through, but that's another.
Oh no, I'm talking about with Elder Scrolls. That's literally like everyone's playthrough. They're just like, yeah, I just end up. They're like, yeah, I was gonna do like this really cool like mage, like half fighter build, but eventually I just ended up pulling out a crossbow and sneaking around the whole time.
I don't play stealth games. Like I don't play stealth characters. You played with me enough to know.
Yeah,
I'm the frontline guy.
I am not. I am in fact your sneaky boy. But on that note, we're gonna go ahead and close out this episode. We'll probably touch about it again. Maybe talk about some of the more like technical aspects between the differences between Baldur's Gate and Dungeons and Dragons. Get more into the crunchy stuff. But on that note, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you guys next week and throughout the rest of this year.